I'll call this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for the purpose of work session. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlynn?
Here.
Mr. Rice?
Here. Okay, we start our board discussions with our meeting with our state legislators. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. I'm going to hand it over to Adam to debut our new abbreviated legislative agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we only have one piece of paper, 2 pages this year. And I'll start you guys with part 1. It really runs the same way that we did in previous years, where we have a request for actual legislation and then more positions supported on the second page. The first one, I believe, is a carryover from last year, requesting that the General Assembly require online retailers to distribute sales tax by physical address versus zip codes to ensure that each locality receives the proper amount. I believe we've had some trouble from our financial management services getting reports of things coming in from the city of Williamsburg versus York County versus James City County. No questions from anybody? I'll roll.
May I ask,
Yes, sir.
so I think there's a pretty universal agreement that that's certainly the fair way of being able to distribute the tax. The only question was there, and pardon me, I don't remember if there was legislation that was carried by anyone last year that would have allowed for this, but was there a fiscal impact that I'm unaware of to this for the state?
I don't know. I don't know that anybody, none of our legislators picked up this one last year, and I don't know if there were any in the General Assembly.
Thanks.
I'm not sure there was a bill introduced. I think that there was. We were waiting to see what the impact of Wayfair would be, the Wayfair decision. And obviously it's been pretty significant, so.
The second one on our list is new this year, and it's to amend Section 9.1101 of the Virginia Code to include special conservatives of the peace employed by a locality in the definition of criminal justice agency. Our Parks and Recreation park rangers are somewhat unique, I think, in the Commonwealth in that they're all special conservators of the peace. They would like access to the VSIN network so that they can run license plates on cars they come up upon. The current code does not allow them to do that because they're not affiliated with the police department. They're sort of a standalone unit of our Parks and Recreation. We've had our Director of Parks and Recreation talk to the representative from the state police who said this would be the easiest way to allow them to do it. Did indicate that we would probably want to ensure that they're conservators of the peace employed by a locality, which makes us very unique and apparently avoid some of the pitfalls that it would be just conservators of the peace.
Did the state police representative indicate whether or not they were supportive of this?
I believe he did. I was not the one that spoke to it, to that individual. Mr. Carnifax was, and as long as I understand, as long as we said of the locality, they would be okay with it. Apparently, there were some other issues up in Northern Virginia with conservators of the peace that they would not want that to happen.
So I carried a bill similar to this, although not quite the same, since it was not directly only about the VSIN network. 2 years ago for Newport News Public Park Association, with the large park in northern Newport News. And there was a question about whether or not all other agencies that would have access to this already have training standards applied to them by DCJS. And so if I remember correctly, SCOPs, so Special Conservators of the Peace, don't require DCJS training or continuing education requirements, and so would not have the same requirements that all other parties who have access to VSIN would have. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
They go through some training, but it's SCOP training that's different than your normal police officer training.
Well, for about 3 years, there was a very contentious debate about SCOP's conservatives of the peace, training standards, firearm training. I mean, it was brutal. And you had the conservatives of the peace who were advocating one thing, but then you had the Virginia Sheriff's Association and the Chief of Police Association who were pushing back, and I think that calmed down. I hope this is not a catalyst to...
That was the underlying question that I was asking without asking one.
You're a lot smoother than I am. I'm the bull in the china shop. So I just throw it out there because it may trigger some reaction from those two groups.
I think that's what the gentleman from State Police was hinting at. Said hopefully if we put it towards locality, but I wasn't aware of the Newport News one. So. The third one on our first page is to amend the Virginia Code to allow localities to prohibit e-cigarette stores from locating within 1,000 feet of a public school. That was from, I believe, Mr. McGlennon.
Really?
At a recent meeting, yes, sir.
I'd like to have it within 1,000 feet of the county line, actually.
I have a suspicion that may take care of itself, but that's
Yeah, let's hope.
another issue.
Mm-hmm.
The fourth one on there was identified by our Commissioner of the Revenue, amend a section of the Virginia Code to allow the imposition of license tax on amusement machines that take payment in forms other than coins. Oddly enough, there's a section of the code that allows us to impose a license tax on coin-operated amusement machines. And I don't know of any coin-operated amusement machines in the county. All of them now have credit cards or swipe cards or something to that effect. I believe that these are different than the coin machines that are have been discussed quite a bit. They're just amusement machines that allegedly are in a few of the bars in town. Don't go to any of them, so.
Well, we had a conversation about them yesterday,
J-Lo?
and I announced that some unidentified senator was putting in legislation to ban them for a variety of reasons. Just no public benefit whatsoever attached to them, zero. So,
One just opened near my house.
really?
Yeah, well, in the little 7-Eleven-ish store right near my house. Yeah. There are now
Well,
lines.
there's an adverse measurable effect already on lottery sales.
Interesting. I did notice yesterday one of our nonprofits received a grant from a certain company that's involved in the skill machines.
The final one on the first page came up at a very recent meeting, was to amend the Virginia Code to require that absentee votes be reported by precinct when there are more than 25 such votes cast in that precinct. I think there was a desire of the board members to be able to figure out who was voting where in the for absentee ballots as we get more and more absentee ballots cast. Is that a
I think
fair
I'll
summation,
pass
sir?
that one to the Transparency Caucus. There's such a thing.
There is, at least on the House side.
Does the registrar's office, is that something that,
No, they're not happy.
I was going to say.
about to say,
I don't see that very,
No, it's really in response to the no excuses absentee
Yeah.
voting that is projected to have as many as 60% of the votes being cast that way. And if that's going to be the case, it certainly would be useful to know actually how many votes are being cast in precincts
Sure.
and what the results are in those precincts overall. I'm not particularly, to me it doesn't matter if I know that these particular people voted absentee versus those didn't, but just would like to know what the results in a precinct would be. And that information would not be available if we just had a central absentee precinct where all absentee votes are presented. You'd see the overall results for House of Delegates that were absentee or for Board of Supervisors or other offices, but you wouldn't see it broken down by precinct.
Yeah, I've noticed this in my district where there are 4 precincts, one very small, a couple very large, and you get a 10-15% that vote absentee. You have no idea whether they were, which precinct they were from. And as a result, it sort of makes your data from your precincts sort of meaningless. And as we get toward a higher and higher percentage that voting early that would be under central absentee, it would be more skewed. You really wouldn't know much. I did talk to the registrar about it, and she says that it's doable.
Oh yeah, the information is available.
The information is available. It's doable. It's just a matter of getting the direction to do it.
Yeah, I think part of the issue that has been that with relatively few absentee votes being cast, then there's a concern that if you actually look at the absentees by precinct, it becomes possible to figure out perhaps how somebody had voted. But with the numbers expected to increase dramatically,
I don't know much
goes
about
away.
elections, but as the increased number of absentee ballots in early voting from a political perspective, I mean, some campaigns try to very actively do what we call A/B chase. And if you had a historical perspective of absentee ballots, it probably might enhance your ability to have a program of chasing absentee ballots based upon prior behavior of people. And so I throw it out there, only in that sense that I understand what you're saying, but from those that get involved in campaigns, it may have some interest too.
Right. And I think that that's going to happen in any case because I'm assuming that as we get closer to the election, there will be reports of who's already cast votes, and then that will, the parties will then be focused, the campaigns will be focusing on the people who haven't voted yet. I mean, it'll change the dynamics of election campaigns quite significantly. If you want to get a message out to people, you're going to have to get it out earlier rather than later, because you're going to miss a lot of folks who are going to be voting earlier. So, anyway. As I understand it, the information is there, it's available, it just isn't reported that way.
Oh, what? So, excuse me very much for being late. I apologize.
Thanks for being here.
That's okay, we assigned you a number of bills already.
All on the first page.
Trouble in my head.
More than you ever hoped for.
1 through 5.
Thank you.
Anything I can do?
Mr. Chairman, we've gone through everything on the first page. Typically on the second page, I just try to highlight that which is new and is not a carryover. Happy to go into detail on any of them. Number 1 is new, and the county encourages the General Assembly to provide funding to VDOT specifically for improvements at the Airport Road, Richmond Road intersection. The other non-carryover would be down to number 7, Eastern State Hospital surplus property. One probably familiar to Senator Mason. James City County encourages the Department of General Services with the cooperation of Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services to work with the county to identify a minimum of 10 acres on the Eastern State Hospital site for the location of a new facility for CBH, which may or may not include a joint facility with OTMDC. The subject property shall be transferred to James City County upon such terms and conditions as may be agreed to by the parties. I will certainly say that Senator Mason and Ms. Vinroot and Senator Norman have more experience with that one than do I. And then finally, new one after a rezoning that happened at the board's last meeting. The county encourages Commonwealth of Virginia to purchase the approximately 2,300 acre property located in the county known as the Stonehouse Preserve for the expansion of either Ware Creek Wildlife Management Area, which is directly adjacent, or York River State Park, which is pretty close to being adjacent. And I understand that the applicant said that they were marketing it to both and hopeful that one entity or the other would take it. The rest of them are carryovers, including VACO and VML and High Growth Coalition, which really sort of made up the rest of the 3 pages that were lost from this from last year.
No inoperable vehicles on here this year. We haven't had them all. I hate to be late, but I'm
the funny guy.
It was odd deleting that one off of it from last year. So.
I know Delegate-elect Batten would have been supportive.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions on either page.
Okay.
With that is our legislative program.
We'd like to open it up for any questions that legislators have, and if there's any indication that anyone would be willing to maybe carry one of the ones on the first page or sponsor legislation for us, that would be appreciated. But we can continue dialogue with Adam at a later date if you'd prefer to do that.
On 2.7, would there be an anticipation that a fair market value would be paid for that 10-acre site?
I'll defer to Senator Mason and Ms. Vinroot on that one. I think that was the intent, but again, I'll defer to you. I know you guys have worked on it more than have
I
I.
think early on, it was maybe problematic that was there. I think there can be a way that we can work through it in that fashion, but that's something that we should certainly talk about in the overall context of the fact that anything we do here is going to be to the benefit of Virginia mental health, public health.
Mhm.
So it could be perceived as, so we should talk further about, and I don't know how far along we are with prospective opportunities, but I do know that at least someone that has been discussed could maybe be proffered, or there could be other arrangements that could help with that situation and be palatable to DGS, what they're trying to accomplish.
They're so easy to work with.
Well, I know you and I have another one we should probably chat about. Not necessarily in this county, you're right. I think it's a very, very important question. So.
On 2.8, you would want the Commonwealth to purchase that 2,300 acres. Didn't James City County increased its real estate tax to have money to purchase open space?
No, we suspended that program a while ago.
I'm sorry?
We suspended that program a while ago, back during the Great Recession. We didn't raise. We did have a 1 cent dedication, half cent for the Green Space Fund, and half cent for the PDR. I think.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And but with the recession, we were unable to maintain that program. We are having some discussion about it. I think that there is some and others can probably better answer this, but I think there is some expectation that some of the funding that was made available through the mitigation money for the Dominion Towers was for the acquisition of public preservation land for the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, there was that. If I remember correctly, they used a pretty good chunk of it to purchase some property in Gloucester for State Park over there.
That's right. Yeah, but was it?
I
And I
mean,
think
it was an appreciable amount of money,
Yeah.
sir.
it had. We had heard during our discussions on this particular case that came before us that the state had discussions with Stonehouse.
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
When I saw this one a week or so back, this was news to me.
I think they had talked to Department of Forestry on this one. Is what they had said. So it would not be new to whichever department they were in negotiations with. I think that they've moved along, and so this was intended by the board as just a nudge, continued nudge that moved forward.
Because evidently they had talked with the Ware Creek Management Group and wanted to add that to that section of land that would connect the two. And that's how it was presented to us as far as that was. First they said they wanted to do it and the owner said no, and then the owner came back and said, we've worked out the options and we do have an option that we could put that up for sale. And that's how it was presented to us at our last meeting.
Is that mostly in New Kent?
James City. The Ware Creek is
The
New
Ware Creek
Kent,
is mostly
and
adjacent
then-
property.
And then it's adjacent right up to that. So that would double the size of that whole area right in there for, wildlife management.
We added in York River State Park because it's really separated by that Stonehouse Preserve by maybe a parcel.
Yeah.
So it's
And the
almost
road-
adjacent
and the
to York
roadway.
River. And it is adjacent to the existing Ware Creek.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for being late. I was sitting in a meeting in my own office, no reason for that, quite frankly. But if I could go back to the one, I know 1.2, I've had some conversations about Newport News about this in the past, and it bumped into some pretty significant problems.
It's remarkable how often you and I say the same thing.
Okay, good. Thank you. I apologize.
Remarkable how I say opposite things.
Yeah, well, I don't know. When it bumps into obstacles, you sometimes do say the same thing. But the online sales tax, we have a pretty good discussion about that and how that, because I don't know how that works I know it's a problem, but when thinking through with my old Visa hat, how we fix it, that's a part I don't understand.
Well, we've talked about it a little bit. I've actually talked about it more with Laura Overy from the Commissioner of Revenue for the city. But because how do we fix it? A fix would be a zip code change or a name change, which would be very dramatic for probably some people that live here. But it's also, it's something that we've got to figure out, because often the city will bump us by in online and love the city of Williamsburg, but that's just not possible. So, you know, they're having to and I think they have a pretty good relationship where they work hard to try to get the money in the right coffers, but it is definitely something that we need to all work on how we're going to fix it. So,
Mr. Chair, has VACO or VML drafted some legislation on this at this point? Because I mean, this can't be just us.
Right.
It's got to be Charlottesville and Albemarle. It's got to be Winchester and Frederick County.
Yeah.
There have got to be a number of sort of independent cities and surrounding counties that are dealing with this.
right. Definitely a question we can ask. We'll be with VACO on the 6th. So that's a question that January, that's a question that we can ask them, where they're at with that. So,
Now, you might let us know if they have some prototype legislation.
okay.
Yeah, 'cause I'm trying to think through the disbursement of a transaction, you know, from the Williamsburg Outlet Mall, Williamsburg, Virginia. You know, and the zip code may not necessarily solve it in all cases. And so you're always going to disperse the money to the locality, you know, or to the company who would send it to the locality. So I can't even figure out where to get into the system to start trying to remedy it.
It would be up to the online retailer to verify that 135 The Main is James City County, you know, have some sort of filter in their system, and I don't know if it's that sophisticated, frankly.
I'm
So-
sure Amazon could do that, but if it's a small online retailer, that would be
Right,
Yeah, that
difficult to be able to.
right.
We got a lot of people in James City County that swear they live in Williamsburg. That's your
yeah.
mailing address. You're in James City County. You're not in
Absolutely.
Williamsburg.
Oh, sure.
And so,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's with residents. And this is a lot bigger ticket as far as trying to figure out how to divide that up.
I just tell them I live in First Column.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I will get back to you after the 6th of January, but if we can, you all also come across any ways that we might be able to solve that, that'd be great. So,
So can I bring up a topic that's not on the list, but and what I would actually ask you to do is to not do something this year, and that is, you may recall that last year there was good cooperation between the Home Builders Association, VML VACO, and the Coalition of High Growth Communities on the question of fixing the 2016 proffer bill. This coming year, we hear that there's legislation that may be coming from some entities, but not consultation broadly, on the issue of affordable housing. The Coalition of High Growth Communities met at the Homestead recently as part of the VACO meeting, and we are cognizant of the fact that affordable housing is an important issue. Almost all of us have been engaged in studies of affordable housing and how to address it in our communities. And we are planning to do a conference in the spring after the General Assembly session on that topic. We did one last year on impact fees. Try to do something every year on a topic like this. What we'd really like to do is be able to find out what the view of each locality is about the nature of the affordable housing problem in their communities, what kind of obstacles there are to providing affordable housing, how we can best address it with flexibility to recognize the differences among communities and still make sure that we're meeting the needs of people who are challenged in terms of finding appropriate housing. So rather than get into a situation where a piece of legislation that hasn't had the benefit of full discussion among all those who are likely to be affected doesn't kind of move ahead on its own this year, that we have an opportunity to explore the issue, see what localities are doing, what they see as their needs, how they would like to see legislation framed that would help in that regard. So it's just a kind of request that as legislation on this topic comes forward, that it would probably benefit from some a little bit of percolation over the course of the next year.
Do you think that representatives from the localities would be willing to stand up and encourage postponing action?
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Because, this isn't a dig, so don't take it wrong. I don't know what New Virginia looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It's got potential to have a lot of components to it, and if affordable housing is one, and
Right.
they feel that they need to push it, I would hope the collective wisdom would defer to the localities if they feel that
Right.
they need to help mold it. So that's why I asked.
Right. The coalition now includes Fairfax County, Loudon,
Okay,
Prince
good.
William, Albemarle, James City, Spotsylvania, Stafford. It's a pretty wide-ranging group. And of course, some of our fastest-growing communities now are the city of Richmond, Alexandria, Arlington, Fredericksburg. So the dynamics of population are changing pretty dramatically right now. We're 11 in the Commonwealth.
Wow.
We can make it into the top 10.
We were in the top 10. It was okay that we're 11. That's okay.
I will say that there is an appetite for a great deal of work on the affordable housing space, but I am not sure that this is the avenue of approach at the moment. The Housing Trust Fund, for example, has been perennially underfunded, and there are opportunities to be able to put some decent dollars behind that. But I would imagine that discussion about anything that happened in the proffer arena needs to, as you said, percolate for a little bit longer.
I think if you're going to look at affordable housing, you need to look at apartments, townhouses, and that sort of thing too. A lot of people think affordable housing, one house, and it may be getting the bang for your buck out of the available land and building up and making affordable. Newport News, I don't know if you saw it in the Gazette, I think it was Newport News, is looking at container homes. They're putting 2 in for this last show.
Newport News.
So they're looking at different options as well. A lot of times you think of affordable housing, you think of a house. Should be affordable living condition or something.
10 stories of apartments on top of the Hempel building.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can do that.
I
We
was
can do
just
that.
wondering,
Good.
since the tiny house movement has just started and seems to be coming here to the peninsula, you can go on Amazon right now and buy a home for $18,000, and within
180 square feet.
Yeah,
This man could not fit in a tiny house, so that's not an option.
I love that.
Yeah,
I'm thinking maybe non-performing hotels.
Yeah, that's right.
well, we
Got
don't
a
want
few
any
of
of those either. So.
There's a lot of options.
I real quickly, just on a personal note, but also on the county note, I had sent all of you an article regarding. I don't think I sent it to you, but I will forward it to you regarding recycling that the Virginia pilot had done that Supervisor McGlennon had sent out to us, and that I'm sure if you've been awake at all this year, you've been very cognizant of the fact about what we have been going through, but. And yes, it is a James City County issue, but it is a statewide, it's a countrywide issue that I really think that the Commonwealth needs to get involved in on some level about, is there something else that can be done as far as, mentioned in that article was perhaps a deposit on glass, which is something that we could really use some that glass has got a chance of being able to be recycled here. But we're very limited on what our citizens can recycle right now because of what's going on with China. So I hope that sometime during the General Assembly or even offline, those are some discussions that you all will be having, because I can't believe we're the only locality that's dealing with it. So, and I'm sure if you even glance through the article, you saw what others are going through as well. So.
Earlier in the year, I had the opportunity to go to Israel and met with a number of economic development prospects were there, and one of them is fascinating, who may or may not have an interest in James City County, but the remarkable thing about it is that they don't segregate or sort recycling, even from garbage.
Sure.
And they can take this, and rather than segregating the stuff, they have a process that can range from beer cans to Coke bottles to banana peels to paper to cardboard, and they can develop it into what I would call a polymer. And we had a press conference in Richmond maybe a couple of months ago, but it's pretty interesting what they can do, and they are shopping for a location. And one of the criteria is that they want a pent-up demand to create a stream of recyclable products to produce what they do. It's pretty remarkable.
It's interesting.
Sounded like a dorm room when you were describing it.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board or our legislators?
I just extend congratulations to all four of you.
Yes,
for your elections.
congratulations.
Yes,
And while we're at it, I would ask Delegate-elect Patton to please present this certificate of thanks to
I will.
Delegate Pogge. We did that
Thank you.
not knowing whether she would be here today or not, but if you would make sure she gets that on our behalf, we really appreciate it. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Thank you all so much for.
Thank you all. Always nice to visit with you.
thank you. See you in Richmond.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
They're in the order.
See you on the road.
Let me ask you something. Yeah. This is in the garage.
Are we recessed?
Are we in the recess?
No,
for-
we're gonna go into the schools next, because they're gonna go talk about this.
I appreciate it, because they're starting in the palace since we're recycling in there. At some point, I would like to pick your brain.
Thank you.
Raise the paper, those people.
Can't believe it's in you.
Right.
Yeah, they're out there laughing.
Messed up my whole plan.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so.
All right, we will make a slight adjustment to the work schedule here and go to number 3 for the fiscal year 2019 school year end of spending plan appropriation for $1,697,787. Mr. Steve.
Mr. Chairman, I did not have much of a presentation. You did hear from Sharon Day, our FMS director, at your last meeting. Sharon could not be here this evening. The information in the package is the same. This is the surplus funds from the capital plan from the school system. It does set aside $600,000 towards next year's CIP, but this is the balance of that the school system had put out there. There were a few questions that I think the school system had responded to, but wanted to make sure that we had answered the board's questions, and Dr. Herron and her staff were here if you had any other questions or comments that you wanted to share with them. So,
Okay. Questions from the board on any particular aspect? You did one.
I did not enter a question,
Okay.
so, yeah,
All right, you okay?
yes.
Good.
Okay.
Well, and so I just asked some questions about the acquisition of additional school buses and the plan going forward. Maybe if you could just talk about that for a minute for the benefit of the public.
Thank you. Ms. Ewan's going to address that this evening. She's our Chief Financial Officer.
Sure. So we have a smoothing plan where we purchase 10 buses per year. The plan also lists for your reference the buses that are over age 15 of years old. But it's a smoothing plan so that we don't in any one year need to purchase, 20 buses, for example. So.
Can you speak up just a little bit? Sorry.
Sorry. Is there a microphone?
There is, it's above us, but if we're having trouble on this end hearing, then the microphone.
So yeah, our school bus replacement plan is a smoothing plan where we purchase 10 buses per year so that in any one year we don't need to purchase, for example, 20 buses to stay on track and replacing the buses as they age out at 15 years. So the request in the spending plan is for an additional 4 buses, and that will keep us on track for this fiscal year.
And the expectation would be that each year going forward, you'd want to include an additional 10 buses to replace buses over a 16-year period, roughly, or 15 years.
Yes, sir.
And I'd asked a question as well about the governor's initiative on transition to electric school buses, and you had some information about that.
Yes, sir. We have submitted a grant application to, we had requested between 4 and 8 buses. We anticipate hearing in December whether or not we have been chosen to get one of those grants.
And you said that, I think your response said that they would pay the
Yes.
difference between what a conventional school bus would cost versus the electric bus?
Yes, sir. We'd be responsible still for the cost of a normal diesel-powered bus, and they would pay that difference in the cost
What
of
is,
the bus.
do you know what approximately what the difference would be?
Approximately 200,000, 250,000.
So it's about
It's over $300,000 for an electric bus.
So it'd be quite a big challenge to eventually replace the fleet, but it's something we would do over time if appropriate, and if it was something that we as a community wanted to do. But obviously, I think they actually they do the infrastructure as well to start us on that journey, and they pay the difference at least for 8 buses or potentially whatever we get.
Whatever they approve us for.
Will you be providing cost differences in the maintenance of these as well?
We're not sure what that would amount to yet, but I do know you can't go the same distance with an electric bus, and if you go somewhere where you can't get electric, you can't get home again. So there may be an opportunity to use, if we do get them on some of our routes, we would actually choose the routes very carefully as to where to use the electric buses, and maybe eventually have a mixed fleet if we start to pursue that for ultimately saving some money.
So I was going to ask if a diesel bus, you figure the lifetime is 10 years, 15 years, what did you say? 15. Do you have any idea what the life is on an electric bus?
I think that's Mr. Snipes. I'm not sure we have that, do we?
No, we do not. It's expected to be the same as a
Diesel bus?
There are some maintenance costs that are replacing the batteries on an electric bus.
Do you know if those battery costs are expensive like they are with cars?
The battery cost on electric buses are about $100,000 to replace the batteries.
A battery?
Yes, and they last about 10 years.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that it is important to recognize here that this is an area where we're going to see a lot of advances. It's already the case that we're getting longer distances on buses. There are fewer moving parts that you have to deal with on these. And frankly, recognizing that school buses are different than automobiles, lots of people have had automobiles for 15 years and never replaced the battery. I think the infrastructure issue is also one that's likely not to be much of an issue before very long because of the fact that almost all the major auto manufacturers are moving in the direction of electric vehicles, and so that means the infrastructure is going to grow pretty rapidly. My recollection was when the governor announced the plan, they presented information that suggested that, in fact, this would, in the long term, provide significant savings to school districts to move to electric buses. This is partly a question of what the fuel costs will be for conventional buses.
What would be the savings? Do we know?
Now, fuel, the difference between the generation of electric fuel and
right, but we're still generating electric fuel rather than diesel fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a cost there, and there's a cost to the battery. What's the cost in 10 years replacing a diesel motor compared to a $100,000 battery, which is probably more than one battery in that bus? I'd imagine it's probably 2 to 4 on the buses. So we could end up.
I think we're in new territory here. I think in this we're part of the exploration because of environmental issues and saving diesel fuel ultimately. But I think it would be something that.
And then the charging stations.
Sure.
And then do we have multiple charging stations throughout the county, or do we all centrally locate a charging station? And if there's a power outage, then what do we do about it now when we don't have a bus? So we're a diesel, I can fire that up and go on that road.
And I think there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages of both. And I think
there is.
Over time, we'll only realize when we're starting to operate a system like that. But this is an opportunity to explore the possibilities if they're prepared to do the infrastructure and pay the difference between a small number of buses. It gives us an opportunity to see what those pros and cons are.
It'll be interesting because your bus depot is out a bit, so the life of a bus on a charge, so to speak, obviously for the environment, this is what we're working towards. But you sometimes find yourself in a slippery slope if you go this way, and yet if no one else. Is there a school system that has gone to electric buses that we're aware of?
Our school is in Northern Virginia that have gone to some electric school buses.
Okay.
Not the entire fleet there.
It's some information. Yeah. It's very interesting. I
think it's something if we do end up as part of this opportunity, it'll be slow moving as we analyze and produce information along the way. And it would be difficult to see a full electric fleet. I think there's always going to be room for both because of the distance traveled to games and all kinds of things. And the infrastructure, it'll only move as fast as the infrastructure becomes available as well.
Well, I'm always banging this one drum on buses, and I'll bang it again today. If we're going to put any money into a bus, I'd like to see seat belts rather than electric to a start. And, I know it's more difficult getting students in and out and all, but if our bus drivers need a seat belt, I think our students need one too. And all of us have to wear them in our vehicles, regardless of the age, and that's the only place we don't need to have a seat belt. And it still is amazing to me. Thank God we don't have hardly any bus injuries, which is a blessing to us. And we've got good bus drivers and they pay attention, and we're blessed to have that. But that one is too many.
and definitely not in our wheelhouse. But I know for a while there you were really you were struggling with drivers shortage. How is that going?
I think every school division will continue to struggle, although I do believe we've got the staff we need at this moment in time. But Mr. Snipes, do you have any updated
It's constantly
information?
changing from drivers who are coming and going on FMLA or leaving us. So that constantly changes.
Tough job for to handle to try to get not bus drivers. That's got to be.
Other school divisions are, I just read an article the other day, Chesapeake is struggling.
Now with the 4 school buses, last year how many we get?
A total of 14 were purchased last fiscal year.
So we were 4 over last year, and we'll be 4 over this year. So that'll be 8 that will start
Well,
aging.
the four that are being purchased out of the surplus money would count toward last year's. Is that
Would count towards this year.
this year? Oh, so it's,
So,
So it's
yes.
so you would,
So this is the question I had, it's on the same vein. The smoothing plan for FY 2019 was 10 buses. We actually purchased 14.
Yes.
Okay, so now the FY '20, it looks like what you're saying is that the CIP only had 2.
Our
Yeah.
operating budget, we have 2.
Two.
So we purchased those. So
Okay, so that was out of operating budget.
That's out of the operating.
Okay, all right, so you purchased those 2, and then, but you didn't have anything programmed in the CIP for the remaining. In other words, if you were looking at smoothing that 10 and you bought 14 last time, you knew you're going to have to buy 6 this year to maintain the 10. You didn't have that programmed in the budget up front. You basically only had 2 programmed up front. Is that correct?
Right, we don't put them in the CIP except when we have a new school coming online. That's
Okay.
the only time because it's new buses added to the fleet. The replacement buses we pay through operational
Operation,
money.
okay.
But we've only been able to we used to have none in the operating budget, and now we've got 2 in the operating budget, but we haven't been able to add to that because of other competing needs in the last few years. So really, when you come to the money at the end of the year, that we've worked hard to not spend it all, obviously, it's the opportunity to try to keep us on track with our
So
plan.
going forward here, if this is approved and then we add those 4 buses, that brings you up to your total of 20 the last 2 years.
That's right, sir.
And then projecting, looking forward, you're looking at 10 per year, but you don't have the funds, so you're probably going to build a budget that only has 2 or 3 in it, and then we'll be doing the same thing again next year, trying to
Very likely.
turn money from that back into the operating budget.
Yeah, we actually added 2 in our initial budget meetings last year in our original pushing things through, and then we ended up not being able to keep 2 extra
Okay.
in the operating budget because of councillors, and we wanted to add councillors. to
What do
the
you expect for the upcoming budget? Do you expect it just 2, or do you think you may be able to put more in?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet.
Okay.
Looking at staffing, special ed and everything else, but we always will try to add and make them a constant, but we haven't been able to do it so far.
I guess my other question, because this was a little confusing to me, because that essentially, the bus money is essentially going into your operating fund as opposed to the CIP, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Most of the other items that are on this spending list, are many of them CIP items? And if so, were they already on the CIP and just being moved forward to take advantage of this money? Is that?
There's one that is currently in the CIP that if it's approved and year-end spending will come out of the CIP, and that's the bus garage, as you say. And that's one that would come out of this if we're able to spend year-end money. It'll come out of it's in the CIP currently in the documents we've just sent to you today,
Okay.
but it'll come out of.
So that's the one item in this that would then draw something out of the future CIP that would give you some more breathing room in the CIP.
Absolutely.
Later on.
Yes,
Okay. All my questions. Anybody else questions?
No, I had a philosophical difference prior. I'm not going to pull the item tonight. I'm very frustrated, ex-board member apparently. But I will definitely be voting for it, but I did need to make my opinion known, not that you expected any different. So,
Thank you.
and then just recognize that school board member Jim Beers is here as well, along with several members of the staff.
Okay. All righty. We have any other questions for?
What was that for, Ruth? Driver's ed? Ruth, that was for driver's ed?
Yes. Yeah.
So the just to get it straight, because every year we talk about school buses,
Sure.
and it's ever since I've been on the board. So the smoothing plan will or will not be followed.
We are following it, but we're using end-of-year money to keep on track.
But we're still, I mean, after this year, next year, with end of year money, we'll be behind. Because we'll only probably have 2. So we might hit 2 or 4. So we may end up with 6, roughly thinking. So we'd be 4 behind next year sitting at this table, possibly.
Yes, I think these 4 will take us through to the end of this year on task.
Right.
But we're always looking to the next year, so we don't end up with a year with too many buses and start getting behind again. So
Right.
when we are in this fortunate position of managing our finances well and having money at the end of the year, we put our buses as a priority to try to keep the smoothing plan moving forward.
But if we have this in the plan and you have funds left over at the end of the year, I know if there's funds left over at the end of the year, you have to come to us.
Yes,
But if there's funds in your budget and this age-based information here is part of it, then the funds that would be left over then could be transferred right into X amount of buses and then keep you on schedule. Correct?
Without coming here?
Without coming here.
Well, the only,
That would
I
have
mean,
to be in the contract.
we authorize a certain amount of money for the schools
Right.
to function with, and they operate within that. I mean, we'd have to increase the amount that we would authorize, to cover that. Basically, what happened this year was that when you made your decisions about where to cut, because we couldn't fund everything the school board had adopted in their budget, so you trimmed back the number of buses by 2.
sir.
But now you're able to come back and say, well, had money left over so we can afford 4 additional ones.
But if this is part of that budget, wouldn't this then be part of the monies you have left over that could be spent on this line item? So that if they needed 10 buses and they were able to save enough for 10 buses, then they could go out and purchase 10 buses.
Right, I think part of the,
I know it's a balancing act. I know in the volunteer fire department, when we came to the county for a budget, we line item what we did. But if we saved on this line item, then we had budgeted money that we could put into the same type of equipment or whatever, because it was equipment cost, where this could be an equipment cost. Okay, we could have line item out that, I'm just looking at ways to,
sure,
help y'all, but help y'all also, save more money to possibly end up with, X amount of buses. Because we're saying right here, we know we need 10 buses till 2030 at least. And then we're
Then we need 10.
2034. And then 1035, we're going to need 10 more. It's pretty much going to be, we figured out every year we need 10 buses.
Yeah.
correct.
So if we need 10 buses and we play the same game year after year, I don't think we're going very far. So if we're going to need 10 buses, we need 10 buses. I'm all for keeping it as tight as possible and not spending any more than we need to. But do we definitely need 10, or can we get away with 6 every year and we put it as a line item? We buy 6 buses every year. Regardless of what happens, we buy 6 buses.
But they may determine that they're going to buy 5 buses and they may need that money somewhere else. I doubt either party would probably want to be, I don't know,
We live by that.
put ourselves in a box like that.
We all live by budget.
Yeah, I'm not saying
Right.
that they're not living in the budget.
No, I'm not either.
I'm just saying
But
that,
we have to do the same thing for ourselves. In other words, when we make a decision to reallocate funding, we bring to the board for approval.
Right.
There is a process, and this process is also part of the contract that
Right.
we have with the city, and
yeah.
and so I guess the question is how much do you want to rely on past history that we've had savings from personnel turnover, or that you didn't have to spend as much on fuel and utilities as you thought you would, and so forth, which is what basically these funds are coming from.
Yeah, it's the gamble.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ideally we wouldn't be in that position.
Right.
We would start to build the bench and have them build into our operating budget. We haven't been able to do that in the last few years.
Yeah.
But certainly will we try again this year, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other challenge is we can't bring our budget down to the wire. We're actually within just over 1% of the
1%,
division's total.
Very tight.
And we have to keep a piece there because we can't go over budget.
Right.
I don't look good in orange.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure out ways that,
Yeah.
we can balance it a little bit better and because I know the citizens out there, every year here, we're buying 10 new buses. Well, we may not be buying 10 new buses. And I'd like to be able to say if we're buying 10 new buses, you'll see 10 new buses out on that street.
Sure.
And, one thing I get, y'all talk about buses every time you meet with the school. And then you try to explain, well, if their budget is tight, they may have to pull from that fund. And people, well, what do you mean pull from that fund? Pull from Peter to pay Paul. And, you get that and you're like, no, they need that to keep everything else going because of unexpected this or that. And, and most people, they think in blocks and they go, this is this many. And that's what they should have, this many. And every year they're asking for 10 more buses. They think you got 200 buses over there. Because it's the same thing we talk about every year.
Sure.
And
Well, yeah. Although I'll apologize for sort of bring so much pressure on the bus issue this time around. But it just was I wanted to get some clarity on what the smoothing plan was and how it was going to operate. I think we all understand that this is very tight, and we had a good year in the sense that fuel costs were a little bit lower. Could have a year where they spike, and we're not going to have that money available, and we have to be flexible enough to recognize it. Well, no, this year we're not going to be able to buy 10. We're going to have to get by with 6 or whatever. Put money into something else.
What worries me too, and I'll stop on the school buses, is worries me is that we can't afford 10 buses at X cost. You add $100,000 to $200,000 more per bus. We can't afford 10 at that. How are we going to afford 10 at that? That's a huge cost.
Well, the state is paying the difference.
State's paying the difference. Yeah, we're paying that, but the infrastructure to run the power and everything
They're paying
else
for that.
and
That's-
the whole thing.
That's
Yeah.
part of a grant
Yes.
for those who have applied for it. The
Right.
infrastructure will be built, and the difference between a diesel and an electric bus will be paid for through this state grant.
Good thing Dominion upgraded than if we wanted electric buses.
Just out of curiosity, as a follow-up, you're now obligated to provide transportation to K-12, though you'd never know it, trying to get from my house to other areas if you go by Jamestown High School at 7:10 in the morning and 7:25 as they're going in on 2 wheels. But has there been any movement to talk about a reduction at the high school level on having to, because your ridership is what at the high school level, 50% or less?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that if a student needs transportation and
Sure.
doesn't have transportation and doesn't have a car, then we're obligated to provide that even if it's for one student.
Yeah.
And so ideally, it's not an ideal situation because the ridership is less at high school, and Mr. Snipes probably can quote it off the top of his head, roughly. Around about,
38%.
so it's beneath 50%. But while one student needs it, we are obligated to go to that student, stop and pick that student up.
And it's amazing in the mornings how many parents drop off their students, even in the lower grades that don't utilize our buses. But still the buses have to pick up maybe 10 students.
We would love them to use our buses.
Yeah.
It's much safer. So,
With seatbelts.
but it's safer with traffic, et cetera, in front of our schools where there's always a complaint about speed, et cetera. It's, trying to get into some of those schools is crazy. So, all right, thank you. So do you need a motion?
I need a motion for the approve the resolution for fiscal year 2019 school year-end spending plan appropriation, and $1,697,787.
So moved.
Mr. Stevens.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
very much.
You
Yes,
too as well,
thank
thank you.
Okay. You need to stand up while your students are coming in, or okay? I'm fine. You think they're ready to come in? Come on in.
Thank you too. Take care. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Get you in a Prius. Gonna get you in a Prius.
It's gonna have to have one that's open at the bottom. So you can travel it.
I wouldn't be able to get to Smithfield. Hey, John, come pick me up. I'm on a ferry.
Is there a charging station?
I know.
You see how cups.
I just haven't looked at it now. It's like, oh, no, they didn't. You see our cups, John? You see our cups?
Technology, there we go. Yeah, it's just please come up and take a seat. And I think we were going to have this. And first of all, thank you all for being very patient with us and talking to our legislators while we rearranged our schedule a little bit. But we're looking forward to hearing from you. And is there going to be an introduction? Ms. Alexi, are you going to do that?
All right, thank you for having us. I'm Dawn Alexi, Environmental Sustainability Coordinator. And these are second-year William & Mary Masters of Public Policy students. We have Shelley Harris, Nancy Chen, and Patrick Wise. They're taking a policy and research seminar, and they had an assignment to get a group together and apply their learnings to a public policy project. So these students in particular were interested in local environmental challenges, and with recycling and solid waste management in the forefront and general services continuously focused on the county's strategic plan, we suggested this research project as it addresses several county goals, including number 5, exceptional public services, and number 7, fiscally efficient government. So they came in, met with us, did some interviews, looked at some past research, and put this together. This is all their work, so I'll give you a
And
copy.
I'll just tell you a little bit that this resulted from the fact that every year the director of the public policy program circulates a memo to faculty at the college who are involved in public policy to ask if there are any particular projects that they think might be worth pursuing, or if they know of any agencies that are looking for any help in studying a particular problem. And I thought, right in the middle of our recycling issue, that this might be a good opportunity to put some sharp minds at work on the question of recycling and solid waste collection. And so Shelley and Patrick and Nancy all probably know more about trash than they ever expected to, and what the best practices are, and what some options might be, and the like. So,
Exciting. Thank
So
you.
y'all solved our problems.
yeah.
See about that. Great. All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. So, as was just said, we're here to talk about the feasibility of a unified solid waste collection scheme. So we'll get right into it. Great. So first, we'll refresh your memory on what the issue is, or bring you up to speed in case you weren't part of the board the last time this came around about 10 or 12 years ago. And then we'll discuss some potential models that James City County could potentially apply to help fix this problem, and talk about the impacts that we expect to potentially result if the board did choose to implement those models. And then we do actually have a set of recommendations that we think the board should consider, and just some notes on implementation and final notes for you. Great. So put simply, as you may all know, the problem is that the solid waste system, the solid waste removal system in James City County is both unorganized and inefficient. So because the county doesn't have any sort of countywide contract or does not provide trash hauling for its residents at the moment, you have a lot of different trucks crisscrossing the county every day or every week. You may have 4 or 5 houses in a row that all get their service from a different company. It's not really ideal because then you might have trash bins out every day of the week. You get the idea. Slide. So because we have these different haulers running all over the county, the General Services Division asked us to look at this problem and think about how we might be able to kind of reduce those inefficiencies. And we noted that one previous concern that the board had and that had kind of gotten in the way of this potentially happening earlier was that there's a concern that doing something like this might actually put smaller haulers out of business. The thought being that smaller haulers might be able to compete with the big companies like Waste Management or County Waste to procure a countywide contract. And nobody really wanted to put those small private haulers out of business because they were kind of mom and pop shops. Unfortunately, all of the local area small-time haulers have already gone out of business on their own without any action happening from the county. So that's not so much of a concern anymore.
Almost all.
Yeah.
Almost all.
Can I ask a quick question?
Certainly.
Did you look at the safety, or not, maybe not safety is not the right word, but you probably didn't get so far as to comparing equipment of the mom and pop shop versus a larger company. That's something that I have got concern about because I certainly respect small business, but just in looking sometimes at the type of vehicles and the lacks of some it's not enclosed trucks. I'm sorry, I can't think of exactly the words that I'm looking for versus an open air, and there's more chances of trash going out. But you probably didn't get that into it.
We did not.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And then just kind of as a trend overall in the area, we've seen that a lot of counties or localities that are similar to James City County already have a process in place in which either the county contracts on behalf of all their residents or they even provide the service themselves, whether that's York County or a place like Hampton, even down to like Virginia Beach. All of these areas on the Virginia Peninsula are already offering this as a service.
So I will introduce to you the legal constraints the county face if they want to change the status quo. So the Virginia State Code, as Patrick has already introduced, is designed to make displacement of small haulers costly, so the county will not make that change. So if the county wants to change the status quo and move to a consolidated plan, they will have to cross either of the 2 hurdles, which is first have written legal findings for nuisance or insufficiency of service, which means that the county has to prove that the current haulers are failing, either for public safety or public health reasons, which is going to be a high bar to prove that. Or the county can sponsor a petition to get 55 or above % of homeowners to agree to consolidate. And these hurdles cannot be avoided either if the county wants to do a mandated consolidation or a opting out consolidation. And the next slide takes you guys through a roadmap if the county cross either legal hurdles. And for managed service, if the county does not do a petition and tries to find legal findings, it will have to either give the haulers 5 years ahead of notice before implementing. Or if they want to do an immediate service, it has to pay the haulers 1 year worth of revenue, which will be very costly. But if the county allows opting out and will not do a managed service, it can implement immediately and without a fee to the haulers. So the easier way is actually to achieve a successful petition with 55% or more homeowners to agree. Then counties can do either a managed service or opting out without paying the haulers for their loss of business and can do it immediately. And after the county has crossed these legal hurdles, they can consider implementing our proposed models, which are York County models, Hampton models, best practice model based on a pay-as-you-throw paradigm and also a universal service. So both York County models and Hampton City models are fee-for-service models, which are quite flexible, allows for opting out. For the York County models, they charge one fee for trash collection, it's $21 a month. And on top of that, $3 more for recycling, so $24 if people want to do both trash and recycling. And they also have discount rates for the elderly and the low-income people, so it's more equitable. And also they can request additional services like yard waste and bulk pickup for additional fees. And the Hampton City model subsidizes recycling with trash fees. So it's $13 a month just trash, and $7 a month. It's actually cheaper to have both trash and recycling collection. And the best practice model is based on pay as you throw. So it's the quantity that a person throws rather than just a uniform container size. And it incentivizes recycling and really decreases trash production. It's the most sustainable plan, but it's relatively new and not implemented in many places. So it will require more elements of implementation. And lastly is the universal service model, which will be provided to all residents and will be funded through a raise in real estate property tax. So all households will receive identical service and trash and recycling. And the impact and what we propose to do with that will be introduced by Shelley.
Yeah, I'm going through the analysis. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into every model and kind of the pros and cons associated with them. So this is the heat map that you have there. It just goes into more detailed kind of variables that you're going to want to consider when choosing a model. In general, you kind of see the color structure. Red is benefit, or red is kind of negatives and drawbacks for a program. And we see that there's a lot of red, obviously, in the current system. And then the different models provide different, a lot more benefits, more green. And then, of course, that's the brighter colors are the immediate service, and then the second kind of column is there's a 5-year delay. So for all of the models that we're considering, there's similar benefits and drawbacks. Benefits, of course, being fairer pricing. Every person's going to be able to pay the same price for the same services, unlike the current system. More accessible information, so you'll have one place that you can go to for information on services and prices, which would be the county website versus tons of websites for callers currently have. A lot better environmental outcomes. A lot of these models promote recycling and incentivize recycling and lower trash production. And then the decreased nuisances and inefficiencies associated with having multiple haulers, the impact on the infrastructure in the county, different pollution drawbacks that we currently have. And then overall, the drawbacks for implementing consolidation, obviously it's going to be quite difficult. Both of these legal hurdles are quite significant to try and overcome, and then going through the bid process, choosing a model, implementing that is quite a large undertaking that would obviously just be easier to not do. And you also take on legal risk with one of those legal options. If you try and prove that the current haulers are not providing adequate service, there's a chance that they can come back and challenge that in court. You avoid that altogether with a petition, but if you don't do the petition, you kind of open yourself up to risk. And then obviously whatever model you do, we estimate there's going to be cost savings for most residents, but some residents are going to be paying, a portion of residents are going to be paying more for service. Some residents right now just kind of on a quirk have a very good deal for service that they won't necessarily, they're going to not necessarily be able to get that good of a deal if you do mandate it on countywide service. And then of course it limits the free market choice, which is a past worry for the county. The York model specifically, this is the one where you pay one price for just trash and then more for both recycling and trash. We estimate moderate cost savings as compared to other models. It's a lot more equitable because there are subsidized prices for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to have trash service at all, low-income residents, elderly. It's highly feasible. This is probably the most common method of consolidation and waste management in Virginia or of the localities that do it. And we see that York County has a similar population as James City County, and it works quite well there, so we'd assume it would work here as well. Drawbacks, if we do continue to allow opt-out recycling, obviously that's not great for the sustainability of James City County. It's not going to have as many environmental benefits. And there's a chance that people just won't, if you have an opt-out system, there's a chance that people will just keep their current haulers rather than deal with the change, in which case you don't actually minimize the impacts of the current system. The Hampton model, This is the one that's $13 a week weekly if you just have trash, and then $7 weekly.
It's a week.
Yes, it's
13 week. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's actually a
Separate for
bit
recycle.
one of the more expensive models, actually.
Okay.
It does strongly support recycling. It encourages people who are already recycling. That's going to be quite popular among them because they kind of feel like they're getting a discount for a service that they're already using. It's liable. Drawbacks are that it's liable to be unpopular among people who don't recycle because they're going to be incentivized to take on a recycling service just to get the lower price and then deal with the rules of recycling, even if they don't want to deal with that. It's one of the it has the minimal cost savings over all the models. It doesn't provide as much cost savings as any of the other ones. And it also leaves the county kind of vulnerable to changes in the recycling market. So, last year, China stopped taking our recycling almost entirely. This model so highly subsidizes recycling. So if at some point a recycling material becomes unviable or unprofitable, the county will have to kind of rethink how they're going to subsidize recycling since it's going to be it could be significantly more expensive in the future. The best practices model, this is pay-as-you-throw. It's a tiered model based on what size bin you're using. It's great in that it provides the best environmental outcome. It highly incentivizes reduction in trash production, or reducing your trash production for a household. And it's great in that if you're a household who is willing to make changes, you're willing to recycle, maybe you're willing to compost or just reduce your trash output in the first place, you're going to see close to $200 a year in savings. So it's great for those people. It also provides the potential to have lower disposal and tipping fees, which is a big part of the bid that haulers are going to provide. It could make that significantly cheaper. It's not very feasible. It hasn't been implemented in any localities that we see. It also limits the haulers that you could choose from. It's not all trash trucks currently have the ability to accept different size bins. Most of them are only made to fit a 95-gallon bin. So I know at least one of the haulers we talked to said we wouldn't even probably do a bid if you're going to require multiple. So it kind of limits the amount of competition you'd have. And then it may incentivize poor recycling habits because if a person just wants the cheapest option, they're going to get a small trash can. And once their trash can runs out of space, they might just use their recycling bin as a second trash can if they don't care about that. So it could increase the contamination rate. And then the universal model, this is the one paid for by the tax increase. We think it's the best as far as it provides the most amount of cost savings for the average household. So if your house is the average median price, which is about $300,000, you're going to be saving about $150 or somewhere between $100 and $200 annually over the current system. It's very streamlined. It's very equitable. Every house is receiving the same service. And then since the property tax is basically a progressive tax, low-income residents are still going to be paying for this service, but they're going to be paying a manageable amount. So it's a lot fairer to them than the current system. And it does incentivize proper recycling since everyone's going to be getting probably a standard 95-gallon bin. They won't be incentivized to use their recycling as a trash can. The drawbacks are that, of course, requires a property tax increase, which I know can be politically very questionable.
Yeah, we don't like those.
Moving right along.
Yeah, we hope to overcome that. Since most people will be, reducing their overall costs, we hope that you can explain that. That just requires a lot more education to residents, especially if you're going to do a petition. And then another drawback is that very wealthy residents are going to be paying significantly more. So if you are one of the 300 people who have $1 million home, you're probably paying, 4 or 5 times as much as you are right now for trash service.
What if they produce less trash than somebody who doesn't?
Under this model specifically, we're just looking at a standard. So there's not like a choice to pay less for a smaller bin or anything. Doing like a tiered service with a tax increase would be very difficult because that would basically be saying, okay, you pay this much more in taxes. Like that would be just putting it down to a household tax increase, which would be, very difficult. Unmanageable. So yeah, those are the four models there.
All right. And so our overall recommendation here really is that the Board of Supervisors considers either implementing a York County type model or a universal services model because these provide the greatest cost savings to the residents, and they also have a number of different environmental benefits as well as kind of getting rid of these different general nuisances and irritation caused by the current system. And in either case, we recommend that the board considers collecting a petition to justify this so that the county doesn't face the legal risk that could be associated with trying to issue a written finding of nuisance or public health risk.
So to implement the York County model, for example, we would have to go through that petition process because of state code?
Yeah, so the justification system, where you have to decide between either doing a petition or finding that nuisance or insufficiency, that applies to any model because of the current Virginia code. We did just talk to some legislators who sounded like they weren't that fond of that code, so it is possible that you could request that they consider repealing that section of the code to get rid of that obstacle as well.
I'm curious, York County, which you've referred to, when they went to this, did they have, do you even know, did they have to petition, or is it so long ago that that rule wasn't there?
From what we understand, yeah, that rule is just under 20 years old. It's a relatively new thing. And
Okay.
also, even if you didn't have like county-wide service, if you had any kind of like county contract with any hauler, you got to keep that contract and even expand that contract if you wanted to, even after the legislation.
Okay.
So we think that they had some kind of contract before that law went into place that allowed them to bypass that.
Okay.
But we haven't looked that far into
Sure.
it specifically.
And they have
Interesting.
one company that they use, is that right?
Yes, correct.
I do theirs through VIPSA. They do.
Yeah.
I remember when we considered this, was it 2006 or 7?
Yeah.
And it was, and like you said, the board decided that they didn't want to get into the middle of telling people, that we were going to require you to do something. At that time, I don't recall any of the issue of petitioning being mentioned. Did you, John?
No, I don't remember that. It was we were talking about a voluntary system.
Okay.
And does that make a difference?
So that doesn't actually make a difference on the justification side.
Mm-hmm.
From what we've seen of the memos from the past time this has come up, it looks like the way the Virginia code is written, there's one block of text where it talks about one potential justification. I believe that's what was primarily focused on the past time this came up. And then the potential kind of workaround through doing a petition is actually another separate block of text that the county attorney's office has indicated would cover, would apply.
Interesting.
So the York County model is $21 for just the
Trash.
fee, just for the trash. What's the fee for the recycling?
It's an extra $3.
An extra $3.
So it'd be $24 if you wanted both services.
24 a
Okay.
month?
A month.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I believe they also offer only recycling if you're interested in that for I think $7 a month.
And they do bulk pickup, isn't that right?
They do
as
bulk
part of
pickup,
a couple of
They have
times a
other
year.
options.
Storm debris.
So we do have just a few points of consideration in terms of implementation. If one of these fee-for-service models were adopted, that would require obviously a sort of billing structure to support that fee-for-service process. Now, that does already exist in some form from the county's current system of billing for their opt-in recycling program, or opt-out recycling program rather, but it would need to be changed at least somewhat to accommodate the new system. Whereas if a universal services model were adopted, funded through a property tax increase, it would probably be simpler for homeowners and for the county itself in that this is something that already exists and is pretty straightforward. And homeowners wouldn't have to be thinking about paying their trash bill every month or every other month, however it's billed currently. So there's a bit of a distinction there. And then for the current VIPSA contract that JCC has for just recycling, it actually only requires a 30-day notice to break the contract, and then there's no other associated penalty or anything. So the county is actually in a fairly favorable position there in terms of potentially getting out that in order to get into a consolidated contract where both trash and recycling are offered.
So the Hampton model, that's $20 a week.
It's $13 a week if you just want trash. It's
Right.
$7 a week if you do trash and recycling.
Okay, so 20 a week.
Oh, it goes down.
No, it goes down.
It goes down.
Oh, it goes down.
Seven.
Oh, I thought it was adding.
Oh,
Seven.
yeah, no, sorry, yeah, it's
Okay,
cheaper
taking
if you
away
do
seven.
both.
Interesting.
Okay.
Wallet system.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
which
Crazy
basically,
not to.
yeah, which basically means the very few people who are choosing trash only are just subsidizing kind of people's costs overall. And
Uh-huh.
it's actually still a very expensive model, even if you're doing
Yeah,
both,
that's what I was
still
looking at.
$20 a month, which is
Yeah.
more than other places.
Okay.
Wow.
So the
Best I can do right now is $19 a month for trash. Is it 7 for our recycle?
Yeah.
It's pretty good. I'm $28.50 for trash.
Now, one thing I'm brought up in some of the last meetings is, I think it's time we need to, look at this and put something in place, but also, looking at the few haulers we have left and educating those haulers. Now, what if we educate those haulers on what we're going to do and put into place? And I asked the county administrator, and this is part of that, within the 5-year contract that we have right now, can we put something in place to look at this and see what we can do and give us 5 years to figure out, what we have to put in place, what we need to do, and everything else, and come up with a good game plan. And this is a very good start on it. Y'all done great work here. But to educate the haulers, if there's no haulers left, we have no worries. So if we educate the haulers that we're moving in this direction and try to find the haulers that are left, hey, there's other positions, or maybe with this company, or, in 5 years, we're planning on changing, but giving them the option instead of, basically saying, we're going to do this and you're out, and we're going to figure out one way or the other, you're going to be out. I'd much rather educate and say, this is where we're heading, but y'all are still our citizens and y'all have done a great service for the county, but we're growing. So what can we do to help you either find another job or maybe work for one of these companies that we may, and I think that would be our better option in the long run as far as what we're trying to do, help our citizens, help the small hauler that this is going to eventually, and this is less than what I pay right now for a private hauler. So with recycle, I don't have recycle because we're out far enough, but it'd be nice to have. And I love my hauler. My haulers, they're great people. I love them to death. And, and don't mind that, but want to make sure that those last couple that are out here in the county either have an option for retirement. Maybe they're getting to the age where we're going to retire in 3 years anyhow. And there's nobody in the family left to take it over. So, we're okay with that. Or putting them in a place that they can, move on to another career and not feel like the county just pounded down and said, we decided this and that's it. You're out of here. Because they're still our citizens.
Well, and I do wonder how many, you said there's not many left, right, of small providers. Do you know how many?
We really only looked at the 5 largest ones, the smallest one of those 5 being Baywater, or Bay Disposal. Yeah, Bay Disposal. And they actually, that was the smallest of the 5 that we looked at, and they actually just got bought out, we understand.
They're smaller than that.
Okay.
They're
but
located in JCSA, I think.
Yeah, no, they're in
Okay, yeah.
We
So
don't,
I think that's something for on our
Right,
side to
right.
find out just exactly who is still in the county
Right.
that is a small provider, because we might be surprised by that as well.
I know at least one.
So.
Well, I know one too. We probably use like
So y'all are paying like $12 a month. Is that what you're trying to say?
No, we pay more than this.
Okay. All right.
I think I could imagine some scenario where you do not a universal model, but if you wanted to do one of the fee for service, where you could maybe carve out a section and say, hey, we're doing this one countywide big hauler for most of it. Maybe carving out a section for a small business if it's really important for them, or facilitating some kind of transition between.
Or you might in an RFP provide bonus points for collaboration with local haulers, something of that nature. So,
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's permissible under state law, but that might be something to look at as a possibility.
And the only problem too is you have to watch what, you're charging me this and you're letting them have that. And, people perceive things, even though you may be paying the exact same thing. People perceive things as being, you're dividing the county and, we don't need this hauler. You're giving us this hauler. People just, I think if it's something we move forward on, we ought to move forward countywide. And there's a lot of people up in Sue and I are in the rural areas that take their garbage to the dump, and they'll continue to do that probably till they can't walk. It's part of what I take mine to the dump. That's what I do. And I know a lot of people, that's what they do. They just that's a Sunday or Saturday event that they go to the dump and take their trash.
That's what we do with our recycling.
Uh-huh.
We take it up there.
Yeah, so,
So
you know.
don't be charging me for their recycling.
It would, you know, and I worry too if charging, doing it, of course, a tax increase, I'm not for. But, you know, but a budgeted type item, because we've got $500,000, well, it's about 600,000 that we put in annually now. And I think did we bump that?
Dropped it down this year on the recycling piece.
Yeah, we bumped it,
We brought it down
down a little bit. And so there's that option where we're missing with what we're doing with recycling to add into that to help pay for some of this too, which may drop those numbers down as well, because I think we definitely need the recycling. It's going to keep our roads and streets and everything cleaner, and people are not going to tend. And when we closed the dump, the contractors were taking care of the dump, and you could dump without a ticket or anything. You could just dump your trash. But the contractors were paying for the dump at that time and kept it operating. Well, then all the laws and regulations with the dumps and the spillage and the problems and all, that eventually had to be closed down. And that's when we started going with the fees, and you had to buy tickets and everything else. That's when I saw in the rural areas a load of trash being thrown out. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not taking that. I'm not paying this. I'm not paying $2 for a ticket. $2 wasn't bad for a ticket. But people just, I dump for free, and now all of a sudden you tell me you're going to charge me. So I think it's got to be. It's almost something that needs to be rolled into our budget.
Right.
And
so I had a question about that,
Go ahead.
which is, did you have a total cost estimate for the provision of the service?
We did, but I don't remember the
Yeah.
number.
So how many households are we talking about being served?
About 25,000.
Right at 25,000.
25,000. I
And so-
think the last estimate we had was like just under 5 million
5 million.
for the whole county. I don't know if that was, I think that was right around the middle. It could be a little bit more, it could be less
$5 million a year.
Right.
annually.
Yeah.
Trash. And that's recycling and trash? Okay.
That's just based on what are they charging right now per household, and estimate that, for 25,000.
Okay.
So that's what people are currently saying. But under these fee structures, there would be savings overall?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So. Okay. You had a last slide, I think.
Yes, yeah, we just have a few final notes, one of which is that the county's 2035 strategic plan includes a sustainability initiative, and that includes components like modern infrastructure, so a program, however it may be structured, that reduces the number of trucks on the roads would help reduce wear and tear on the infrastructure, for instance. Protected community character is another part of that sustainability initiative. I don't think anybody is too fond of having trash bins out front every day and garbage trucks going through their neighborhood. Exceptional public services. We feel that this would be an opportunity for the county to offer a really good public service that's currently kind of a frustration to some homeowners because the information is not available, because it's unclear what everybody's paying, because it's kind of disjointed. And it could even end up being a component of fiscally efficient government, and that it could mean savings for the average homeowner in James City County. And finally, we are writing up our results in a final report that will go into more detail than what we had time to discuss with you here today. And we'll certainly share that with the General Services Division and with you guys.
Thank you.
How much of the York County bill does the residents pay, and how much does the county pick up?
So my understanding is that it's balanced. It's not, the county is not picking up the tab there at all. It's a fee for service that's structured to just direct the cost directly to the homeowner.
To the citizen. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the county, because right now we pick up a fee right now. So in order to for recycling and all that, we're picking up a portion.
Okay.
To get us through to when we can put a good program into place. But so this would be totally on. This would be, it'd be a savings to me what I pay right now a year. So it's cost savings for what I'm paying, adding recycling to it. Mm-hmm. And so I think if we go down this road, of course, the biggest thing probably in the final notes is education. Educating the the citizens on how is this going to benefit you, and what's this going to do, and how's it going to ease your life, and what's it going to take off of your plate as far as having to go to the dump or having to worry about this, or who's hauling this week. Okay, now I got to renew next year. I know it's just going to be a continuous thing, and I'll pay X amount, and that's it. And I think that would help, and that's probably what we need to do. That would help our board as far as when we decide to do something like this and roll it out. Because like with the taxes, when we did the last tax increase, we educated everybody why and what we were applying this to. And once they knew that and the ghosts are out of the scenario, then they were able to look at it and go, okay, I can understand that. That makes sense. All right, I'm okay with that. I'm paying X now, and I'm going to save money. Oh, I'm in for this plan. And I think that'll help this board as well and staff as we roll this, move this forward. Y'all did a great job. Thank you. Very good. Very impressed.
Thanks for speaking to us.
Yeah, appreciate it very much.
We've got other problems. We'll put y'all on that.
The first one's free. That was
All right, we'll have to get new students in.
They're learning, they're learning.
Good job.
Okay. We are now to number 4, amend adopted calendar for location change for the joint meeting. The joint meeting was originally going to be in Legacy Hall. It's now going to be at the Law Enforcement Center. So I will look for a motion.
Motion?
Okay, we have a motion.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Will that be downstairs as you come in?
Yes.
Will be.
Okay.
Yeah, downstairs as you come around the
You
left.
won't be in the tasing room.
And we'll have
I was
parking.
just double checking.
We'll have parking figured out as well, so some of us will be behind the building so that we have parking out front for the other.
Can you
visitors.
refresh us the date and time of that?
December 3rd.
December 3rd,
9 o'clock in the morning.
9 o'clock in the morning, I believe.
Okay.
Are we hosting?
We are.
Okay.
Okay.
Excuse me, I've got it at 8:30 in the morning.
8:30, okay.
30. Oh, me too. I've got 9.
Well, I'll
Me
verify
too.
that, but it's 8:30 on my calendar, so maybe my calendar is off.
Yeah, I had 9 as well, so let's make sure
I'll have that to you so you know what time.
Thank you.
we will have the record reflect whatever the correct time is
That sounds
As soon as we
good.
hear from
as soon as we hear from
9
Well,
a.m.
Teresa has it 9.
It's here on your
so let's leave it
thing,
there.
9
Let's leave
a.m.
it
Is it 9?
Yeah, so much for calendars.
The motion we just approved is at 9.
Is that 9?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Done.
Well, then I'm going to show up at that point.
Okay. All right, so that's our board discussions. We are now down to board requests and directives.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yep, as well.
Thanksgiving.
Well, I do have one in response to citizens who reached out. I'd like to put the Second Amendment resolution making James City County a Second Amendment sanctuary on our next agenda of December 10th for discussion and a vote, please.
Okay. Propose we put that on as a board consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Everybody accept?
Thank you.
Discussion.
Discussion?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any other?
I just mentioned that I went to Shaping Our Shores meeting on Thursday afternoon. I know there was also one this past Monday night, but it was a very interesting discussion. And, small number of citizens turned out, but they had some very interesting, thoughtful ideas
Where
about
was that held?
at the rec center.
Rec Center, okay.
Okay.
I'm good. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, it's fine.
We had on the 13th, the school liaison committee meeting where we talked about their CIP. And of course, I think that the CIP information has been sent to us via link so that it's available for you to look at prior to the board, the joint meeting on the 3rd. And I was, I think most all of us were there at the celebration of business. Very impressed, and I wanted
It was
to
a wonderful.
pass my appreciation on to
I'll pass that on to our staff. I
our
thought
staff. They did an excellent job on that. On the 15th, I did get a tour of War Hill High School, which was interesting in that it came up in discussions today with Scott about their auxiliary gym, which I guess I've seen the location of where they're trying to propose it, but I think that's where we're looking at potentially putting a somebody has some additional money to make it a
Emergency
shelter. So.
Be smart.
I was rather impressed with how smoothly, despite some of the occasional glitch on technology at our location, but when we did the comprehensive town hall meetings that were all linked together, it went remarkably smoothly, I thought, and we had a very good turnout. So I was very impressed with that.
Ours was the highest, just saying.
Yeah.
Not bragging or anything.
And I will say that I did go attend a meeting. The developer had reached out to me about the new shops that are being proposed on Monticello. Some of you may have seen some email traffic already. Yeah. And they did reach out to the communities. I gave them the HOA contacts, and they had a meeting over at Legacy Hall last night. They had 2 men from their development, 2 or 3 people from their development team. I think Vernon Getty was their attorney. I was there, and then there were about 20 citizens, and so it was a very interesting discussion. They raised a lot of concerns, a lot of questions and stuff. So that's one that will be coming forward on a fairly fast track right now. It's scheduled to go to the Planning Commission next week, the 4th of December, I believe. So it should come to us on the January meeting. There is an online petition that is being circulated right now. There is some resistance to allowing any additional development on the Monticello corridor. So we will have some
Primarily because of traffic.
Okay, because of traffic, and also in this particular case, if you remember where this piece of property is, it's a very narrow strip adjacent to where the Batteries Plus is, and it would actually have an access at the traffic light at Monticello and Windsor Mead, and there are homes behind it, which would be effectively probably screened. There are no entrances from back there, but there were concerns about noise, and the big thing was traffic, and my understanding is that if we do approve it, it still has to go to the Commonwealth Transportation Board for approval as well because of the traffic issues there. So there's a lot to be looked at on this one, so I just wanted to give you all a heads up on that, and that there appears to be quite a bit of public concern about it.
The thing that I will just add to that piece is that, what I've seen and what's been sent to me as well, and I think most of you have been copied on, or we've all been copied, is that there seems to be this thought that we're responsible for backfilling empty retail space and for the rent as well. I've gotten several comments about, well, you need to lower the rent in these empty buildings so people will go there instead of building something new. And so I'm going to tie it back to the Engage 2045, which I thought was great, but just have to share that some of my concerns from the very first time that we met with the consultant continued on to that night, because it's, well, I don't want any more development. Okay, but there doesn't seem to be an understanding that there's already development that's coming. Sure. And just like, when I've tried to take a little bit more time when responding to somebody to say, we can't force a company to go into an empty piece of retail. And in talking with our economic development department, I think they try to push people, they make people aware, as do real estate agents, of available retail space. But what works for Sadler Enterprises may not work for Larson Enterprises, and so I may say, well, no, I'm going to wait for something new. And as a board member, I can't go into an empty place and say, you're charging $1,500 or $5,200 a month. You need to charge $4,000. So I think there's also just a misunderstanding of what is in our purview,
One of the things that was brought out by the developer last night was the changing nature of the market. He says that a lot of the empty ones are the big box because that dynamic is changing. People, those are not economically viable anymore. So that makes it difficult when you have those that they can't really fill. We do have some of these smaller ones. Newtown's a good example. Where you do have, I'm sure the rents are just very high, you're going to have vacancies in there. And you're right, we do not control this. It's not a rent control
Yeah.
program. We don't. The market determines that. And I think the concern on the part of the public expressed was whether or not there was just across the board too much approval, and that's a concern that we have to try to discuss with them and educate folks about. Because this appears to be the very last piece or two. I mean, there's across the other side of 199 over by the water tank towers. We've already that's already been zoned and approved. That's in the process that can be developed and built any day. Apparently, there's a pad over next to Walmart, the grocery store, that is probably available for anybody. Without it could be built by right. I'm pretty sure.
On the corner there?
Yeah, it's right by the corner. Yeah. So there's still some places along Monticello, but they're not many.
No.
The only other one is not on Monticello, but it's up around the corner on News Road next to Rite Aid. And in fact, I got a call from that developer today to meet with him next week.
I think at one point I had asked Jason and Paul, because we had, sometimes you get email, oh, you approve everything. And I think I'd asked how many new commercial developments had we approved in the past 4 years, it's a very small number. I mean, I want to say 3. And some of that were changes to current things that had already been approved, but we may have tweaked a tad. Now, I realize to some people 3 is 3 too many, but we're not every meeting approving new retail space. So
I explained it to people when I talked to them one-on-one. I said, it'd be the same thing if your house and you decided you live in 1,500 square feet and you want to move up to 2,200 square feet because your family's growing. And I look across the county and say, no, what I've got available is an apartment over there. You're going to have to move in that apartment. And they said, well, that's not fair. I said, it's the same thing with the commercial side. I said, you can't go, you can present it and say, would this work for you? And our EDA and all of it is moving in that direction to go, here, available lots, here's available spaces, here's available, and some places don't fit. If, you can't say, okay, you want 1,000 square feet, and we're going to make you move into 5,000 square feet, and then we cause the business to go out of business because, we can't do that. It's the market.
And they do, the economic development and ED, they do try to help showcase some of these empty areas to businesses coming in, but as you pointed out, it may just not work.
I will note in the last couple of years that we have had a lot of the ones that were empty 2 years ago have begun to fill. I mean, and some of these places are doing much better. I've been absolutely amazed at not only Colony Square, but the one over on John Tyler. That one is back from the brink of death.
It is that. That was in bad shape.
There are still some rough areas, but I think we've made some progress. Anyway.
Well, John.
But remember that this is part of our job to make decisions about this, and there are legitimate concerns that I think are being expressed about congestion and the elimination of buffers and the basic question of how much retail is right for a mixed, diversified economy. You're adding more service level minimum wage jobs in all likelihood, many without benefits, and is that really economic development? Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I don't. My point was more what's within our control and what is not. So just because I think
people don't understand that always.
And it's the same thing as I moved here 6 years ago. And I don't want anything else to change. And I'm like, well, how about the ones who've been here 100 years? So it's a balance. We've got to balance. And we've got to listen and just try to figure out how to balance it.
Okay. If there are no more board requests or directives, we have a closed session scheduled. And we have an appointment for the EDA. And I want to see if you were interested in making that appointment without going to closed session.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
I'd prefer to discuss it.
Okay. Let's discuss it then.
Motion for closed session.
We have consideration of a personnel matter, appointment of individuals to county boards under commissions pursuant to section 2.2, 3711A1 of the Code of Virginia pertaining to the Economic Development Authority. We have a
Motion.
motion?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
All right. Okay, we're in closed session. Close the door. We'll call back into session and
Mr.
look.
Chairman, I move to certify that we only spoke about the item we said we would speak about.
Okay, we have a motion. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. And we now are looking for an appointment to the Board of the Economic Development Authority.
I'll move Mr. Stanko.
Mr. Stanko, and that is for the balance of a term that ends August 1st, 2023. That's the vacant term on the sheet. Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. And now we will look for a motion to adjourn until 9 a.m. on December 3rd for the joint meeting at the Law Enforcement Center.
So moved.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We are
Doug,
Probably not.
am I correct? Is this correct? We're adjourning until December Call to order this meeting of the James City Service Authority Board of Directors for a regular meeting.
Mr. Eisenhower. Here. Mr. McGlinnan. Here. Mr. Hippel. Here. Ms. Larson.
Here.
Ms. Sadler.
Here. Next presentations. Anything, sir?
No, ma'am.
Nothing? Public comment? Anyone signed up?
No speaker cards.
Consent calendar would be our minutes adoption. Motion?
Motion for approval.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries. Next is public hearings. Authorization to convey easements at 115 and 122 Depot Street. Mr. Brown.
Yes, ma'am. Members of the board, the James City County has requested that the Service Authority grant 2 easements to the county for a drainage improvement project. The addresses are 115 and 122 Depot Street. They are the locations of a current lift station and the site of a former lift station that is now vacant. Neither one of these easements will have any impact on the JCSA operationally at all. And staff recommends approval of the Service Authority granting the easements to the county.
Okay, so with that, we'll open the public hearing. Any speakers? No speakers. We'll close that public hearing. Any discussion,
The
questions?
adoption.
I guess we'll need a vote.
Yes. Mr. Eisenhower? Aye. Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel? Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye. Board considerations?
No,
Happy
ma'am.
Thanksgiving.
Yes. That's
All
right.
right.
Board request directives?
Nope.
Nothing? Okay, general manager's update.
I just wanted to mention a couple of things. The rate study is well underway and will be presented to you at a work session at your January work session, so
Okay.
roughly a couple months from now. And also wanted to let you know the recruitment and retention study has kicked off. There were focus groups with employees this past week, and so that is underway. And that initiative hopefully will be wrapped up sometime in the February timeframe.
And Mr. Powell, I just mentioned that I as part of the Greater Peninsula Workforce Board, I attended a meeting this past week at New Horizons and mentioned to the folks there the concern we have about finding people who have appropriate technical skills and ways in which they may be able to help with that. And a couple of other people said that their utilities might also be interested in that.
Okay.
So
Okay.
hopefully we'll get some opportunities to discuss that with folks at New Horizons.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? And with that, I'll look for a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on December 10th, 2019 for a regular meeting.
So
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. We are adjourned.
All right. Thank you all very much.